told all of them many times how sorry I am for things that I did and for things that I didn't do. There are things, though, that I have been accused of, that I know didn't happen, that I didn't do, didn't transpire, or whatever, but it becomes unimportant because it's really on the emotional level.
Welcome to Fatherhood Voices, breaking the toxic cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all, the mess-ups, make-ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Welcome to another episode of Fatherhood Voices. Now today I have the pleasure of having a very dear friend and actually a brother of mine that I've known since, I'm going to say somewhere 2006. And our relationship has spanned the test of time, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs, and a lot of knowledge and wisdom I picked up from my dear friend and brother that I've not only worked with back in our banking days, but also have grown a deep relationship with over the years and learned a lot. And with that, welcome to Fatherhood Voices, where we're breaking the toxic cycle. Jerry Sawyers, welcome. How are you, my brother?
I am good. That's a great introduction.
No, thank you. I'm excited to have you on because we have such a deep and profound relationship. And just to hear your story, I know a lot about your story, but a lot of people may not know. And you being a native of West Covina, and excited to hear those stories of your glory days in high school and also just your time in LAPD. So we just have so many correlations, so many similarities. But with that, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll start with, once you introduce yourself, just your childhood of how life looked like for Jerry growing up in the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about you and I is that we came together and met in the banking industry, but then we had so many shared experiences. I was a generation ahead of you in that area, but we both LAPD experienced, both 3 daughters, no sons, and then even going to the same Sunrise Market, a little neighborhood market. But yeah, I started out in West Covina. Actually, it was Valinda, and it was incorporated into West Covina later on. But a typical just Southern California childhood kid running around with my siblings, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. We had a house that behind us was just open space. It was just a hill. And I think we got up there when I was about 4 and moved away when I was 6, starting first grade. And it was such a remarkable home for me, and my memory is because the things that I did there, and I look back later and I go, wow, what parents are dumb enough to let a kid that age do the things? Like, my dad bought 2 donkeys. Actually, they were, honest to God, jackasses. And one was named Jack and one was named George. And my dad had put me on a horse when I was about 3. First, I was in the saddle with him, and then my own horse tethered to his. And so he loved horses, and he said, if you boys learn how to take care of these jackasses, then I'll get you horses. And it was just a nightmare. But I would go up there and try and feed mine. I think George was mine, technically. I remember getting caught underneath the picket fence there and rolling up like a little ball while this thing's playing soccer with me. But that's just the way it was in those days. My brother would throw me in the back of a little red wagon with a bunch of pop bottles, and off we'd go to the market. When he's 8, I'm 5, and you just didn't think anything of it. There was no concern for safety, or it was just carefree life. And my dad was the kind of dad that just believed in like all the things, the freedoms that we should have. He got me a BB gun, a bow and arrow, later on a pellet gun. We had firecrackers, and he just believed in us going out, and because he came from Kentucky. Him and my mom were both born in Cincinnati, Ohio, on the other side of the river, but on the Kentucky side, it was really small town stuff. His dad was a barber. He actually named me for his dad. I share my dad and my grandfather's middle name, but my first name was his first name. And he was a barber there in, I think, Ludlow or Covington, Kentucky, Newport, Kentucky, something like that, one of those little small towns.
And you had one brother. How many brothers, how many sisters?
2 brothers, okay. And poor mom. So my older brother was 3 years older than me, so she had 3 years of just him. And then I'm born. And then 18 months after me, she has twin girls, my sisters. 12 months after that, my younger brother. So sometimes I was considered the older and sometimes it was the younger. It just depended what stage we were in. But I felt like I was dead center, having a brother 3 years older and one 3 years younger.
Let me ask you a question. So, pretty all-American family?
Yeah, except my mom was very dark. Her dad, 100% Syrian. He came over here when he was like 14 or 15 with about a dozen brothers from Syria. And I've got adventures and stories that they told that I won't get into. But I just marvel at the fact that him being as dark as he was, and more than the average African American today, he was darker than that. And he was always out in the sun, so he always looked like this really wrinkled old guy to me. His last name was Busali. It was Cade Busali until he got here, and then it was Joe Joseph. My parents, honestly, they're both very attractive human beings, and they look like movie stars. My mom had that Sophia Loren look about her and always very well dressed. And my dad, same way. I'm like, how did these hillbillies come out here? And they're like, I guess my dad really believed in fake it till you make it. He had that philosophy that if anyone asks you if you can do something, you just say yes, and then you figure it out afterwards. And he was pretty self-taught, smart guy in the Marine Corps. I think that shaped him, but he joined the Navy when he was 15 and a half. They caught up with him before his 17th birthday, so his mom had him discharged, but when he was 17 and a half, he turned around and went right back into the Marine Corps. Oh. And that's how he discovered California. And
Dad was pretty adventurous, so he, like I said, got you jackasses and let you guys just do things that in today's day and age definitely probably wouldn't happen. But how was your dad? How was your dad growing up? How did he show up in your life?
So he was, I think, the typical, in some ways, man that of his generation. He didn't make it into World War II, the greatest generation, but he was in Korea. And I think, so he was very much a disciplinarian. He had expectations. When we went out, we were always, for having 5 kids, there wasn't messing around in restaurants. We were all expected to behave very well. And he could be the funnest guy to be around. He loved family get-togethers. He was always the impetus for getting my aunts and uncles and cousins all together, to come to our house, whether it be for a swim party or all the holidays, trips to the lake. He'd bought a little ski boat there for a time. Loved going to the movies, loved eating out. But the other side of him was he could be very demanding, very intolerant of failure. I think I struggled mightily as a kid with ADHD or learning disabilities. So I struggled with reading. I struggled in school early on. Things didn't really click to me till I was really in about 5th grade when all the things came to light with my failing grade and everything. But there was times when he would just sit me at a table and say, "You're not going to get up till your homework's done." And I would have no idea what I was doing, so I would just sit there terrified for what seemed like hours. There was a time when it was like, okay, after school, I want you to come in here. You're going to sit in the dining room at this table, and you're not going to get up until your homework's done. And then I would sit there just dreading when he would come home. But then the weekends, it's let's go have fun. Let's go play ball. Let's go do these things. So
let me ask you a question about that. I know in that time there wasn't social media and Google and so forth, so it was a different time. Now, this is the 70s?
Yep.
Okay.
And 60s.
60s and 70s. Yeah. And so now looking back on the experience, now that you're an adult, you've been a father, you've raised children, and knowing that there's technology and so forth, because this is still a common problem to this day. And a lot has to do with fathers that step into the masculine and ego and won't acknowledge. I use myself as an example. I didn't acknowledge my daughters had Tourette's, and I didn't acknowledge that I had Tourette's. And so they would get punished for it. They would get punished for tics and so forth. And they had ADHD and so forth. So now knowing that, and that you were forced to sit at a table to do your work, you didn't know what the fuck was going on, but this was just, there weren't a lot of resources out there. Now looking back, what do you think he could have done differently in that time? But then also, what can a father and even parents do now when they have children that maybe haven't been diagnosed with ADHD or any type of learning disabilities, what can they do to help minimize the, I guess, emotional, psychological impact on their children?
I'm not sure either one of my parents were equipped intellectually. And of course, some of these things hadn't even been diagnosed or generally talked about. So my dad always equated everything with laziness. He would not accept that I may not have been super smart, so all I could be was lazy. And that was a label that I had for a very long time. And as much as I wanted things to be different for my children, my middle daughter, Lauren, was very much like me. And she had other just learning disabilities and behaviors that, I recognized them, but I didn't really know how to deal with them. She was very much a detached child with most people, and then very clingy to a few that she let into her world. I know that she also struggled early on with school, but she was a great overcomer. And having three daughters, the first one, Catherine, I thought, this is really simple. I must be like gifted father. Everything's easy. And then Lauren was really 180 degrees different. Very loving, very sensitive person. But I saw in adulthood that because she had to work so hard, she became a very high achiever.
Let me ask you a question. If you could sum up your dad and the life that he lived, what's an experience that stands out to you? A memorable moment in your childhood that...
There's quite a few. I think my dad always had, he wanted greatness in his own life, and he wanted it in his children. He was a big dreamer, but he was just the classic extrovert. And he always seemed like a very big man, and he really wasn't. In stature, he was about my size, but he was like fearless. He loved to go to Dodger games, and if there was a better seat and somebody wasn't sitting in it, he had no qualms with improving his seats. At the time, I thought, nobody does this. Later on, I figured out everybody does this. But I was very much an introvert and shy, and I did not want the attention on me. So I thought, if we're sitting in this seat and somebody shows up, I'm just going to be mortified, right? My dad was just at a Dodger game. He would yell charge, and he would have the whole lower deck would hear him. And he was a salesman. I think he was a bullshitter. There's no other way to put that. But that's the thing. Exaggeration was part of his life. He just and that caused me great consternation too, because the things that I did achieve, he didn't seem to have a great deal of interest in those things. Even though some of my gifts, I saw that he had them as well. Very artistic. He could draw like nobody's business, and I had pretty much a lifelong love of writing. That's what kind of brought me out of the dark days of school. Was I had a summer school, and when I was introduced to poetry through music and whatnot. But my dad, he'd written a screenplay, and he'd met with producers in Hollywood, but he never talked about that. I found out about these things later. He became an electrical engineer. He never had a degree, and no one ever questioned him because he was all self-taught, and he was really good at it. And he was also very quick. He was so smart that he found ways to take shortcuts and do things. But yeah, the overriding thing, I think, for him was just he was bigger than life.
Okay. Let me go back to your childhood and tell me about a time when maybe he overreacted, or maybe you felt something was unjust, that maybe he just didn't go about it the right way, and it's something that's stayed with you. It just ingrained in you. Is there something, a moment you can think of that just has...
Yeah. So my dad could be very physically violent. He believed in spankings, and he used a belt. And there were several times that I can remember in my life. It usually didn't happen by myself typically it was me and my older brother getting in trouble, so we were both going to the room for the spankings. And he could sometimes in there, he would bluff a bit, but sometimes he'd really take it to us. On one occasion, me and my brother had destroyed a chase lounge in the patio right before he was having a big party that evening. And so we got good spankings then.
Like physical spankings.
Spankings, yeah, take
like
off the belt.
Whipped your ass spankings.
Oh, yeah, where you're jumping
like
around.
old school.
Oh, yeah. My mom, she'd usually like a flip-flop or something. She believed in it, too. But what stands out is the last spanking I ever got. And with my struggles in school, I was one of those guys that, again, I didn't want to draw attention to myself. And in those days, they would write your homework on a blackboard. And the teacher might write down questions or problems, and we were all supposed to be copying them. And I would get so far behind, it would be like letter, I'd be like A, and just really slow. And the teacher would typically like, okay, how many are finished with this question? And then she'd have to erase it to make more room. And in the beginning, there would be maybe half that raise their hand, they're done, and then again.
So what happened?
And about the third time, the last time, I'm not raising my hand because I don't want to look stupid in the classroom, but then I'm not turning in any homework. And so teacher called my parents in and they're like, here. And I'm like, nothing's done. And I got all of it at one time when it's okay, you're going to go home, you're going to do this. And so I got home with my dad and I finally just lost it and I lashed out. And I was like, I hate this. I hate you guys. I'm going to run away. And my dad, that's it. So went in and he gave me a spanking, and that was 5th grade. And it was a good one. It was violent. And I don't look back and go, I was abused child. But today, they would probably have hauled him to jail. And I don't remember leaving any lasting marks or anything like that. And he never hit me anywhere else. It was, this is the way you discipline a child that's been obstinate or whatever. But that was it. It never spanked me after that.
How did your mom react to that? Did she try to stop it, or was she just stepped into her place in that time as that's the father's role and the mother's role is?
And I think I directed a lot of my anger actually at my mom. And then she told him, or he got wind of it or whatever. I don't remember exactly. But my mom, she believed in spankings also as a way to discipline children, but she never wanted to see it go too far. And my parents, I shared with you, they had a very troubled marriage, and there was a lot of, so I would try to not do anything that would upset my mom, that would then, she would turn on my dad, and then my dad would turn on her. I tried to take it. And my older brother being 3 years older, and he was strong-willed, so he would resist the spankings. He'd struggle or whatever. My dad would be like bend over, and he'd hold his hand back there and be wiggling and all that kind of stuff. And I would just try and be quiet, and maybe this gets me off the hook or less severe. But yeah, my mom, there was times when she really thought my dad was going too far. But then if she would really get into it, that would just
turn on her,
make him angrier, and then he'd in turn take it out on her.
Do you think your mom stayed with your dad because of the kids?
That was always the claim. I think her generation, it was also fear. My mom was smart, but she wasn't educated. Like, she would win a spelling bee in 8th grade, but never finish high school. She could write really nice. She could spell. I think they got better educations actually up till about 5th grade than today's kids get all the way through high school. There's just things that they can do. So she could run a household, she could manage a checkbook. But the idea of her being out in the work world and trying to support herself, and that, I think, very fearful. My parents, they split up and got back together more times than honestly I can count. There was multiple divorces and marriages within this relationship. So the idea of her ever being with another man or dating somebody else, that was just not something that she'd do. And even the times when my dad was out of the house, It could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 6 months, whatever it was. He was still the man of that house. He could come in anytime he wanted. She would never say, "You don't live here anymore." So he was there for every birthday, every holiday, everything. So it was pretty dysfunctional in that regard. And you don't even realize how bad it is at the time.
Wow. It's interesting because just to know that even though he was out of the house, he still showed up.
Yeah.
He still showed up. And I'm sure that had an impact on your brothers and sisters, that even whatever they were going through, the chaos, he was still present for.
Oh, yeah. And so much so that I know that there are children of divorce that got pretty rowdy. I can think of some friends that, where their parents, where the dad wasn't in the house, they got into some bad things, whether it be drinking or getting into drugs or stealing or any of those kinds of behaviors. And it's, there's not a dad in there to discipline them, was the thoughts then. I never felt like my dad wasn't there to keep me in line.
Wow. So let me fast forward now into early adulthood for you. And so now you go through the motions, you go through junior high school, and now you become a father. What does that look like? How old were you?
I got married right before my 21st birthday. I started dating my wife-to-be when she was 16. She was a sophomore, and I had just graduated, and a mutual friend got us together. I knew of her, but I didn't really know her. Her locker was close to mine. It's funny. I'm a big senior. She's a little sophomore, but she had caught my attention. And once I started dating her, that was it. And I think with coming from the broken home that I came from and the dysfunction, I thought I could create something better or perfect. And my older brother, he was married young as well. So he was married at this time. I had a cousin who was the same age as my brother. We all went to high school together, and they were in the same grade. He got married young. So they were doing all these different activities together. And I looked at both these and I thought, this is what I want. They're happy. They got their wives. And in my life, frankly, abstinence before marriage was very important. We were all very much involved in church. And I think that also was pressure to get married. And when we got married, we thought, simple, we'll be married, but we'll both be going to college. We'll be working part-time. We can easily afford this. We'll just be together, and we can have all the perfect little household that I had always envisioned. And then the craziest thing was my brother, I did not know initially, but he was going through a breakup about the time when I'm planning my wedding. And by the time we got to my wedding day, him and his wife had already split up. She was supposed to be in the wedding, and then it was touch and go, and she was very close to the family and become close to my wife, Linda. So ultimately she was in the wedding, but then, she left, and they were never together after that. And it was just during those last couple of months up until the wedding day that I was like having, panic and going, is this a mistake? What am I doing? But, I already felt like I was past the point of no return. The idea of, and even though everybody said, you're too young, you shouldn't do this, you're making a mistake, my dad was way against it. And he ultimately stepped up and helped out with the wedding and expenses and all that kind of thing.
So when did your first child come into the picture?
Less than a year.
Okay.
So we got married at the end of November, and I'm pretty sure we conceived her on New Year's Eve, my birthday, because my wife had lost her mom to cancer. And I think that was another pressure to get married. I wanted to save her. Her dad had hastily remarried after losing his wife, and this woman had come in, and she was like the classic evil stepmother. And Linda was in a household like that, and I thought, I can take her out of that. I can be the man to save the day here.
So you took her out. You have your first daughter, and what's her name?
That's Catherine.
Catherine. Okay, and how does that look like? Now, Catherine's in the family, And how are you showing up as a father?
Again, we had gender roles that were, in those days, very specific. The idea of a changing station for a diaper in a men's restroom was unheard of. When I was growing up, it was dad takes the boys, mom takes the girls. If we'd go out shopping, if we'd go to the movie, anywhere, and that's just the way it was. On one hand, I recognize that my wife is 18 years old, and here she's got a baby, and on many levels, I'm like, this is my fault. Getting back to my wife losing her mom. So she had cancer and was afraid to use the pill, birth control. Could that cause cancer? I don't even know if you could still do this, but she was doing a diaphragm and it was not as reliable. So I think that's how she got pregnant 2.5 months after we were married. And so that first year, I don't think life changed much for me. I held the baby. I loved my daughter. I put her in the car seat. I did all those kinds of things. But I never changed a diaper. I didn't bathe her. It was just expected that. And Linda had gotten pretty sick with the pregnancy. And after Catherine was born, she was stay at home. And now I'm struggling to try and figure out how to support a family. So I'm basically working 2 jobs.
And when did your second daughter come into the picture?
I wanted my children relatively close in age and always thought we'd have 2. They were 18 months apart, so okay. 9 months after. It was at that point that I knew some things needed to change, and that's what led to the police department.
Okay. And your second daughter's name is?
Lauren.
Lauren. Okay, so Lauren came in the picture. You were working 2 jobs, so now then you went into the police academy to make better income for you to support. And how did that look like? Now you have 2 daughters and now a whole new career. How did you show up for your girls?
A lot of that time is like a blur. When I went through the academy, it was still very much a full stress academy. And still living in West Covina, having to be at the academy 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was trying to go to bed early. And my ex-wife, she was a superstar. She made sure I was getting my rest. She learned how to spit shine my gear for me. She was up with the babies, and it was all on her. She was like taking on everything in the house so I could devote. And the academy takes all your waking hours, but it was...
So you weren't present during that time?
No.
Okay.
No. On Sundays, a little bit, but for the 6 months during the academy...
And then when did your third daughter come into the picture?
21 months after Lauren.
Okay. So now you have 3 girls, and tell me how that looks like. Are you still not present? The academy's over.
The first year after the academy, I was in Rampart Division and as a rookie, and it was, again, taking up a lot of time, a lot of driving. But life was better. We would have outings. We would go places and visit family. Linda and I could still get in a date night once in a while because I had 2 sisters who were unmarried at that time because they were in their early 20s. She had a sister like about the same age, and then my mom was in the area. And everybody was anxious to take the girls. We could go out, we could do things. We took some trips, but nothing changed in the way of changing diapers and getting them dressed, doing their hair, all that kind of stuff. That was still... all on Linda.
So then, if your daughters were to reflect on their childhood, I know you can't put words in their mouth, but what are memories that you created for your daughters that they would be able to?
The fun dad. And again, I very much wanted to make memories. And I think this was something my wife at the time shared that also, because we would plan things like we would take them out of school for a trip to Disneyland or drive them to LA to see the premiere of a movie. And we took them to see Phantom of the Opera. And we had them all dressed up, and we had each one of them like a little mask to hold, a little one of those ones on a stick, Mardi Gras, Phantom kind of thing. I think those are the things that they would give me the most credit for. Being artistic and loving to decorate and do those kinds of things. I always made sure that the house had all the fun upright, party, all that kind of stuff. We're always credited with the nicest Christmas tree. And I made a big deal out of their birthdays and all those kinds of things.
And were some areas that you look back on, maybe when they were growing up, that you now look back on and go, I could have done things differently?
With Catherine, I made the mistake of thinking that everything was always okay with her. And I heard that in retrospect with my mom. My mom always said, you were the easiest one. I never had to give you that kind of attention. And my siblings would say, but you did. And even though he never said anything, he missed out. And Catherine was like genius level IQ. She was answering the phone before she was a year old. And it was just crazy. She was very conversational. She had no interest in getting up and exploring things. She wasn't a climber or physical, but man, she'd light up a room. When she was a toddler, she won these little baby pageants. We didn't lead her towards those things, but people came and asked us, like I was working at.
So how did you not show up for her?
I like to take her to the swings and play and do things, but I probably just didn't have real deep conversations with her. And if there was anything going on in her life that was wrong, I probably didn't know about it because I didn't ask about it and she didn't volunteer it. It wasn't until she was in high school that I really saw where she had anything that was less than delightful in her whole life.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I just had a conversation last week with my oldest daughter. And we're in a place now where we talk every morning on her way to work. And 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't talk for about 5 or 6 years. But she said something last week that really caught my attention. She says, I don't want to have surface level conversations anymore. When we talk in the morning, I want to dive deeper into just, I'm going to paraphrase, but she said, peeling the layers. I don't just want you to know about how work's going and what are you doing, but I want to really start to dive into deeper, more intimate conversations where we can get to know each other. So it's funny that you mentioned that when I asked, what were some ways that you didn't show up? And I can resonate with that because I think at Fathers, we have these surface level conversations where we think everything's okay, but we don't take the time to peel apart. We don't take the time to ask questions. And I can remember an interview just not too long ago. Actually, it was last week. And when you think about fatherhood, it's almost like being in sales, knowing your customer, knowing your child. And you're in the real estate field also, you have a new client, you want to find out if they're looking to purchase a home, where they're looking to purchase at, what are they looking for. You're getting to know your customer. And we came up with this new thing, this PDF called Know Your Child, so KYC, to really peel through the layers to learn the ins and outs of your child. So just bringing that up just brought that to the forefront. As fathers, we need to get away from these surface conversations and really start to ask the questions, not just, oh, how was school today? Oh, what did you do? No, but it's something like, how was lunch? Who did you sit with? What did you guys talk about? So that really just struck a chord with me because it's literally something that we're in the process of putting in play.
Yeah, I think that's important because anyone can become a parent and there's no requirement, there's no test you have to pass first, there's no manual that you get. And I think in my generation, women were probably much more educated to things about becoming a mother than men were about becoming fathers. I think you just look at your dad and you go, well, that's the way it's done, so this is what I do. And I discovered over time that all three of my daughters were very different individuals. They had different needs, gifts, aspirations, insecurities, and you just think initially, child, boy, girl, raise a boy. And that's about as complex as it gets. And these creatures are more complex than any car you'll ever get behind the wheel of, any computer you'll ever sit in front of, and I was oblivious to that.
So looking back now, any regrets?
Oh, certainly. With the oldest one, Catherine, I regret that I just took for granted that the word that comes to mind is perfect, the perfect child. she would babysit and she would handle other people's children better than their parents. She could get their attention, she could get them to behave, she could engage them. Like I said, everything was easy.
Okay, so for her it was regret.
But I missed out on so much. Lauren, I didn't recognize really how to deal with her. I needed to be quieter and more gentle and more understanding and not try to force her to be like Catherine. And with her, I was always aware that we had a problem as a father and a daughter. Frankly, she was a child that could make you feel like you're not loved, you're not capable, you're not needed. And very early on, she had issues with like sucking her thumb or little tics. And these were things that, again, to me, it was just habits you have to break. And you break them by force. So I made those mistakes early on. And then
let me touch on that one real fast, because I'm dealing with this right now with one of my daughters. And it's trying to learn how to maneuver the relationship, especially as an adult. And she pointed something out the other day that pissed me off, but it struck a chord. And she says, nothing's ever good enough for you. And it had to do with the new job that she got. And I'm like, what about your career and so forth? But she's one that can just go to the jugular and just cut you up and just leave you devastated. So I've had to sit with when you say you needed to maneuver through how you dealt with the oldest daughter versus your middle, and just trying to find that way to communicate. So it resonates, because I'm actually going through that now, where I'm still trying to have these relationships with my daughters, but I'm trying to manage them all the same way. But my learning is that, each one has their own individuality, and I have to shift the way my persona in how I interact with them. So you saying that just brought that point, because I was having a clash like in the last 48 hours over this, because one of my daughters she's a storyteller, and I just want to get to the point and let's go, and it's frustrating for me. So I'm learning how to navigate through that. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but just was...
Yeah, and I'll just get back to Lauren real quick for a minute. I tried to plan special days and dates with each one of my children and things like that. And most of the time when I would take Lauren out, it was hard to get her to engage and feel like we were really clicking, having fun together. But with a couple of exceptions. And one, I got her a rock polishing kit, those little tumbler things, and she loved that because she was very much with her hands, and I built a kind of a trough for her to pan for gold kind of thing in the backyard. And then one time I built a train out of cardboard and all kinds of little household items. And those are the things that she remembers the most, and that when she said she felt most comfortable with me, when the times that we were able to discuss this. So I wish I had more of those experiences with her, because you really had to just not try to force her affection, but just allow her to come to me in her own time, in her own way, but to have activities, because I think that gave her a sense of comfort and space where she could feel engaged with me. And then Stephanie, she was like the hybrid child, and where Catherine was blonde hair, blue eyes like her mother, Lauren, dark hair, dark eyes like me, but we could trace it all the way back to our relatives too. We could see different members of the family in each of these children. Steph comes along and her hair is not as dark, not as light, her complexion. She was just like, finally, now we got a child that looks like her mom and her dad. And she was really easygoing, very content all the time, great natured, but she loved to be around me. And she wanted to be in Daddy's lap. And as she got older, I think she got this impression that she was supposed to be a boy and that she had to be my son. She'd sit and watch football games with me and still being super girly and giggly and everything, but she would sit, and I don't know early on if she was really enjoying the game at all, but she just loved engaging with me. And with the boys at school, she'd come home And she would show me her knuckles, and she'd say, I played bloody knuckles with the boys, and I beat them all. And she was a little thing, but she was like a little firecracker. And she would stand up to anybody. This is one thing I'm really proud about with all my girls, is that if they saw bullying, another child being picked on or ignored, they were right there to engage. And they would literally come to anybody's aid, rescue. But with Steph, it was like I loved every minute with her. And as she got older, I could just see the creative talents that she had. Very gifted writer. And she loved acting it out, too. I remember her reading aloud one day, and I thought she was reading from To Kill a Mockingbird. She was doing it in this southern voice, and it was amazing. And then I found out that it was something that she wrote herself. And I'm like, when did you find the time to write this? And she, last night. And she was in junior high school. And I think she'd written like 18 pages in a day. And it was fantastic. She's the one that became a comic book writer and loves the Hollywood life.
So what do you regret?
That I probably let her play this part of being a son too much, being too boyish. And I never knew it at the time, but I heard later on that she honestly believed that she had to behave in this way, this tomboy thing, that she was trying to be the son that I never had. And I'm like, Holly, it never crossed my mind. I loved her as a daughter, and to put that rumor to rest, it's okay. Given, I think, almost any father, when your first one comes, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. I just want them to be happy and healthy. So that's where my mind was at, and I had the girl. The second time, if you go, can you choose ahead of time? You go, yeah, I'd like to have a son. Have one of each, That's what everybody wants. Experience of being a dad to a girl and a dad to a boy. So if you get the girl the first time, you want the boy the second time. Not that you just want boys, but the moment you see that child and it's a girl, you love them, and you're happy that you had a daughter and that God blessed you. And now I got two girls. They'll be able to share clothes and be best friends and all that kind of stuff. So that's where my mind was. The third time around, I don't think we thought we would have more than two for the longest time. And I know my wife, having children that close together and working as hard as she did, the burden of a third child was probably not high on her list. But then the minute that baby's born, again, you don't care that it's a boy or a girl. You just...
All right, so we had some technical difficulties, but we're back. Now, I know you wanted to share something about Steph, and I'm going to go and have you share, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit you with some hard-pressing questions.
Okay. Talking about the tomboyish sense of Steph, there was an incident when she was in 8th grade. She went through a little rebellious period, and her mom and I made the decision that she was not doing her work or whatever and taking things for granted. So we decided to strip her room of everything that we felt like was a luxury or beyond the bare minimums. So all media left the room, all makeup, jewelry, everything. So it was like a dormitory. And it seemed to yield great results. We saw a huge change in her, but it was some work to do all that. So then, not too long after that, something else came up, and I don't remember what it was, but it was like, okay, I gotta punish you. And I said, I can do the same thing we did before, or I can give you a spanking and it's over. And I said, when I was playing sports when I was in high school, we did something wrong, and the coach get out the paddle. We took the swats. We took it like a man, and it was over and done. So which do you want? And she said, I want the spanking. I said, okay. And so she's 8th grade, and I didn't have a paddle, and I spanked her with my bare hand. Really, honestly thinking that this is just another thing that we'd share, that she'd talk about how tough she was or whatnot. And I had no clue at the time that this was abusive, because it was like, we give boys swats, we do it in sports, we do it in fraternities, other things like that. She made the choice, and it's one of my biggest parenting regrets. And it was brought home to me in no uncertain terms moments later when my oldest daughter came in, and she just read me the riot gear. And I knew in that moment that I'd crossed the line, that I'd made that I'd done the worst thing without any ill intent, that this was abuse. And this was a man using his bare hand to hit a girl. And I think in that moment, lost so much respect from all three of my girls. I mean, they rallied around that. And today it's as clear as day. But at that time, I just thought I was being a tough dad and giving my daughter a chance to be the tough girl that she always was presenting herself to be.
Powerful. How does father come back from that? Well, now they all rally around, and because I've experienced that quite a few times where I've misstepped, and now they all come to to help each other, to stand up for each other, and it's been a hard pill to swallow.
The thing that I always tried to instill in my daughters is that I wanted them to be each other's support, best friends, stand up. But there was a time when I thought we were all in it together. I was the protective father. There was incidents that I could talk about where people had done things where I became the alpha male protecting my family in physical ways. But in that moment, I saw that I was the monster. They rallied around each other, and where they had differences about a lot of things, as siblings do.
So how do you recover from that?
I don't know that you ever do 100%. And unfortunately, this occurred at a time that was right before we split up, my wife and I. It was the same within a couple of months. And when it was at the breakup that I discovered not only that my wife of 20 years didn't want to be with me, and that's not to say that she was at fault. She was the one that caused the divorce, because that wasn't the case at all. But in just knowing that she was resolute now to get a divorce, I was shocked, like beyond belief, that all three of my daughters were huge advocates for that. It's like children don't want their parents to get divorced, right? And it was completely, we want mom to divorce you. All three of them. And this became, it's like, where have I been? What did I do? How far can you fail that your daughters feel that way?
Oh, wow. I can definitely resonate, because I remember when all three of my kids hated me. Well, I think some still hate me, but we're healing. But yeah, they wanted me and the mom to get a divorce. I left the house because my daughters wanted nothing to do with me. Well, I take that back. My middle daughter did go with me. But I can see how they can rally behind situations or circumstances and unite, no matter what the difference is, to push you out. So it definitely resonates. Let me ask you a question, because I know the answer to this question. I think the audience doesn't. How's your relationship with your adult children, adult daughters now?
There isn't one, is the simplest way to put it. Over the course of being separated from them, for the most part, the oldest one, Catherine, has had almost separate for a long time, and then she had some things that she was dealing with in her life, and she reached out to me. And then after a really profound moment, it seemed like we had healing. And then there was a period of years where it was a great, again, father-daughter relationship. Lauren, who I always feared that I would have a difficult relationship with, she hasn't been close, but she's stayed the most connected. In other words, the perfunctory happy birthday or happy Father's Day or Merry Christmas, she would at least make that. Not that there was a lot of closeness involved with it, but it was like she was doing the thing. So as of now, to my great sadness and shame, I don't have any of my daughters in my life.
I remember when in our banking days, and there was a lot of drinking involved, going out. And you knew me pre-plant medicine and now after. And I think you witnessed a big part of my transformation. It's a work in progress. But I remember something you always used to tell me. And you said, and I'm just going to paraphrase, hey, if you don't change your ways, you're going to end up like me. You're not going to have a relationship with your daughters. And it stuck with me, but it still didn't set in. It wasn't until after I sat with plant medicine and so forth that it really came to fruition. And then now it's been a process of healing. It's been a work in progress, a lot of bumps along the way. But I know you've sat with plant medicine now and so forth. I'm going to start with this question first, and then I'm going to lead into another one. Do you think you failed your daughters as a father?
Certainly. And the observations that I made with you when we met, your daughters were much younger. And I know you were absent quite a bit from time to time. And for me, I was there. Physically, I was there. But because I think of the struggles of my own depression, of not being equipped to be a parent, while my wife and daughters were bonding over brushing teeth, saying prayers, all these things that I was sporadic at. And then the fact that they could feel a lot of my internal anger and discontent, even though I wasn't yelling at them or outwardly, I was like probably something radioactive, sitting in the house, quiet, not seen, but felt. And I was poisoning them.
So how do you start the process of rebuilding that relationship? How many years has it been?
It's been over 20
Years. So how does it start?
The thing that I had to do in order to get the divorce, and people didn't understand this at the time, but when I finally realized that I can't win back my wife by saying the right thing right now or whatever, I made up my mind that the best way that I could really show up and love her the way that I did was to stay away. And it's just counter to everything that I'd ever believed. You know, that if you love somebody, you be there, you get there, you persist. And I told myself that if I really love this person, this is the only way I can do it. I'm not the best thing for her. And I adopted that later on with my daughters. I said, if they are happier not having me in their life, I have to respect that. I know I've told all of them many times how sorry I am for things that I did and for things that I didn't do. There are things, though, that I have been accused of, that I know didn't happen, that I didn't do, didn't transpire, or whatever, but it becomes unimportant because it's really on the emotional level. My middle daughter, Lauren, she has 3 daughters as well. And it wasn't until she got pregnant with the first one that I discovered how unwanted I was. And that's really hard to get your arms around. But I know that these granddaughters that I have never met, happy, healthy girls. And as much as I would like to say that I know what they're missing out on, I'm known as Uncle Jer Bear to people, not just my nieces and nephews, but in general. I think I have a good heart. I think I am very faithful. I take relationships seriously. I think I have a tremendous amount of love to give. I think I have some humor that I could instill in everything, but that's not my role at this point. So where I will continue to love each one of them unconditionally. And I've been in the process of trying to reach out through writing. And I know it's important, but I don't know how much more I can demonstrate that's going to make a change. At some point, you really, I'm getting dry here again. You have to I'm not okay not being in their lives. That would be a mistake to think that. But I accept it on the level that if it's good for them, then it's what I need to do. And I won't force my presence upon them. And think they saw a counselor early on, right after the big last day of blow up in the marriage and everything. And this woman said, you got to give them space, got to give them space. And I'm like, no, they've got to see that I'm still here, that I still love them. And sometimes I think staying away was the right thing to do. Sometimes I think it was the wrong. There's nothing that can be done about that now. But they just have to know that whenever they're ready, if they're ever ready, I'm here for them. I'm still their dad, and I love them unconditionally.
And I get where you're saying you gave them their space and you're still giving them their space. Do you ever think there's going to be a point where you're going to start fighting back to, and I'm not going to say force that relationship, but just to let them know, hey, I'm not going to give up. And I know that kind of goes against where you're feeling like giving their space, but if I can just be on it, you're not getting any younger.
No.
And you probably have a couple of years left. If I'm going off statistics, I'm being facetious there, but wouldn't you like to
see, my youngest
feel
daughter, her birthday was March 20th. And I know she still has the number. And I reach out to her. And at the same time, there's many years where I wish her a happy birthday a couple days before or a couple days after, just because I don't want to show up on her birthday, even in writing, to make her think about her dad and whatever thoughts that brings to her mind. I don't want to ruin her birthday. But this past year, I did, and it fell silent. And then I save every message in my phone. I've got those birthday wishes going back, and they start to sound the same. There's nothing different that I can add. So I know that's that. With my company, I have...
Let me stop you there for a sec before you go there. Sorry. I know I've shared this before, but I just want to share this again. There was a period in life where I didn't talk to my oldest daughter for 5, almost 6 years. And the one thing we've had conversations, and I remember her, even me putting her on the phone about a year ago and talk. We didn't have communication. And even when I would try, it went silent. It stayed silent for years. But the one thing when we did start to heal that relationship, that she said, never forget that she says, the thing that hurts the most is that you stop trying. And that was my ego and pride. And I don't know if that's ego and pride on your end, or you're just taking on the role of, hey, I'm just going to give them their space if they want me in their life. But I look back and yes, I should have tried, but just my ego and my pride was so strong that it kept me away. And then I think about the relationship with my father and how, yes, I want a relationship, but my expectation is that he needs to reach out to me, that he needs to call because he's the father. And then after looking and go, wait a minute, I can do that also. But me sitting as an adult child going, no, why doesn't he call me? Why doesn't he step up? I don't know. I just wanted to put that into play because, yeah, we can sit passive. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. Only you know what's best for your situation. But I just wonder if it hasn't worked in all these years, you gave them their space because you were honoring maybe what you thought is their beliefs or what you think's the right thing. But what is it? Where does that point come or where do you draw the line and say, wait a minute, no, I'm going to fight for this. Okay, I'm going to fight for this. And it's better to fight than to just sit on the sidelines and hope that one day things will heal. Because I see this time and time again, and I've seen this. I'm sure you've seen this, and I just experienced a passing not too long ago. And it's funny how when somebody dies, all of a sudden these people come out of the blue that didn't have a relationship, and they feel bad. Oh, I'm sorry, and I should have done this, I should have done that. And why didn't you do it when they were alive?
I think a lot of us in this situation probably had that crazy thinking of, oh, yeah, when I die, they'll be sorry. Or if I had cancer right now, I would get sympathy and they would come back to me. I started to say with my job, I have this contact management system and automated emails. And one went out for Easter in my contacts. My daughter Lauren's in there. And I never gave it a thought. I didn't know that she was getting this email, but I got the Happy Easter thing went out to her. Anyway, I do get back the notice of who's unsubscribed. Nothing on March 20th from my youngest one. Easter, I get back this unsubscribe from my middle one. I was in contact sharing emails with my oldest one last year, and seemed like they were going really well, and they were positive, and she sounded happy and working towards a reconciliation. And then she went silent again. And then I sent another one and nothing. And I sent a last one and nothing. And I'm like, okay, am I scaring her away by now being persistent? Because she warned me about that. They are all in the same room right now. Would I walk in there, get down on my knees and beg for their forgiveness? Or I don't know that I can change their minds. And I don't know because each one of them, I hear it's something different as to why they don't want to be in my life or what they're angry for. I know they had all felt like they wanted the divorce, but then later on, their mom had some illness, and I got all the blame for that. So you left her, but you weakened her before you left. So if somebody could tell me what it is I need to say, what forgiveness I need to ask for, what behavior I need to demonstrate that would change that, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I don't know if it's the same thing, all of them, that's underlying, or something different. Because like I say, with the reconciliation with my youngest, we got years and everything's great. And then we have a little disagreement, and then she completely cuts me off.
I know you're saying that each one, there's different layers of maybe hurt that are going on. Each one would be a different reconciliation. But what would be, if there was a message that you could give your daughters, and I know each one would be the individual, but just one general message that you could give to your daughters, what would it be?
Give me a chance. I know that I was hugely depressed and angry throughout most of my marriage. And I know a lot of it, most of it, 99% of it went unspoken, but it was there. And I know I still have my struggles internally with myself, but I think I know how to not let it show up and affect other people.
So what would be your message to your daughters?
Again, see me for who I am now.
And just give me a chance.
I think they're missing out. I know I am, but I think there's enough good in me and good things. I think that's a lot to do with my book. When I was writing it all the time, I was
So
thinking
tell me about
that.
this book. What child is this? You wrote this book.
Yeah. I dedicated it to my daughters, and I don't have to find the page because I know it, but I thought that if there comes a day that I am not here and there is no reconciliation, that I would leave something behind that they could read and enjoy, and something that they could show to my daughter showing to her kids, my granddaughters, hey, your grandfather had a lot of issues and a lot of problems, and there's a lot of reasons why I didn't let him come around, but he did write this. He was creative or whatever, but there would be something that I could leave behind that would be showing me in some goodness or having some value or worthwhile, that I brought something to the world. And my dedication, I quote from A Christmas Story. The first line of the book was, Marley was dead to begin with. And because I would sit with them every year with this grand plan that we're going to sit down and have them all in my lap when they're toddlers, and we're going to read A Christmas Story. And we seemed to start it many times and never finish it. And Catherine joked one year, that's all she knew of the book, is Marley was dead to begin with. But A Christmas Story is a story of redemption, right? It's a man in his old age discovers what he's missed out on.
So this is your story of redemption. What's the name of
What child is this?
it? Can you raise it?
Oh.
And you can find that on Amazon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry, for being vulnerable and sharing. This has been another powerful episode of Fatherhood Voices. We're looking to break the toxic cycle. And with that's a wrap.